Peter Bethlenfalvy is Ontario's Minister of Finance. He is the one who issued the letter yesterday calling for this pan-Canadian meeting on the CPP, and he joins us right now from Queen's Park in Toronto. Minister, really happy you're on the program. Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you, Michael.
Now, Alberta, as you know, has just begun their public consultations, this ahead of a promised referendum on the CPP. But in your letter, you say this proposal could cause serious harm. What kind of harm are you talking about?
Well, you know, I think we're stronger together. So the Canada Pension Plan has shown, since it was founded in 1965, to be reliable, sustainable, stable, something that Canadians never had to worry about. And I think that's one of the testaments to Canadian federalism. And so, you know, I think anytime that someone is frustrated with how things are going, it's good to have a conversation. And I do worry about Ontarians. You know, we certainly been a big supporter of all things pan-Canadian, and the Canada Pension Plan is something that we feel quite strongly about. I would add that, you know, the methodology that they're using, which others have looked at and said, well, if we use that methodology, Ontario would get 65% of the assets. So just two provinces at almost 120% of the assets. So I think some of the other provinces, BC, maybe Saskatchewan, maybe Atlantic Canada, would have something to say about that. So I just think it's important that in a time, Michael, of a lot of uncertainty in the world, geopolitically, economically, that this is something that we should discuss and reassure Canadians that, you know, we can work together to keep the Canada Pension Plan together.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the numbers, because obviously you're referring to the 53% claim of assets that Alberta is making as this process begins. But, you know, to also hear it from Danielle Smith, if Alberta were to withdraw, it would only cost Canadians, she says, who stay in the plan, an additional $175 a year to maintain CPP stability and the current benefit payout. Do you accept that number, or are you worried about that kind of figure being quoted?
Look, I would say a couple of things. We're going to have discussions so we can provide rigor on the analysis. I know others have already taken a look at some of the math. You know, when you're 11% of the population, 16% of the contributions, and you want 53% of the assets. I think most Canadians would figure out that there, you know, maybe some more work needs to be done on that. So I also know, having been in finance for decades, that when you have long-tailed assets and liabilities like a pension plan does, you make little assumption changes can have massive effects down the road. So, you know, the actuaries will go through it, the experts will go through it, we'll get multiple opinions. And I think one of the most important things to do at the same time is to make sure that we're talking about some of the reasons they feel that they don't want to participate, or, you know, they haven't said that they don't want to. They want to hear from Albertans, and I think it's important to hear from all Canadians how we value the Canada Pension Plan and how we value Alberta as a part of that plan.
Yeah, you know what, let me pick up on that point, though, because I was wondering, you know, from your vantage point, how much of this do you think is about the CPP versus, you know, a symptom of a greater frustration with Ottawa?
Well, you'd have to ask Ottawa and Alberta a bit more on that. But I can tell you, I can share some of the frustration from Alberta. And I certainly I lived in Calgary one summer. And, you know, the population is growing very fast in Alberta, just like it is in Ontario. And we have to make sure that the economic prosperity and the infrastructure is in place. Now, here in Ontario, for example, we want to build a 400 Highway Series 413, just in Brampton, one of the most populated and busiest places in all of North America. And we can't get moving because of impact assessments from Ottawa. So, you know, this is provincial jurisdiction. This is a provincial sovereignty, because we've got explosive population growth, in part because Ottawa is a partner in bringing a lot of Canadian people to Canada. And I think that's a great thing. But we have to get stuff built. And, you know, I think Alberta shares some of those frustrations as well.
So do you see yourself in this process, you know, ahead of this meeting coming together, do you see yourself as perhaps an ally to Alberta as it explores opportunities, or do you see yourself in opposition to Alberta regarding the CPP?
I don't see this as for or against. What I think, and being a lifelong Canadian, is that when we work together, we can solve just about anything. And I think one thing that we saw during COVID is where we worked federally, provincially, municipally together, boy, we got a lot done. And I think that's what Canadians want us to do. And it's not just about the Canada Pension Plan, which I think is something that binds all of us together, provides portability, sustainability, and security for Canadians in a very turbulent time. But, we want people to come to this great country. We want people to prosper, to get that done. And I think that's why I don't think it's a for or against, it's a together.
Mm-hmm. Again, I want to pick up on that point because that's interesting because as you talk about working together, I have been wondering because we are in this very polarized time, people very worried about, their bottom line, their monthly income. Do you think this debate has the potential to have a negative impact on national unity?
Well, that's certainly not the purpose of going into this. I think, having finance ministers talk about common issues, whether we agree on everything or don't agree on everything, my view always is when you bring all your interests to the table, you find those areas where you can agree. And I think there's a lot of things that we can agree on, whether it's Alberta, Atlantic Canada, the territories, east, west, north, south. And I think we got an urgent need to do that because, if you'll just look at Ontario, our population grew by almost 500,000 people last year. This year, we're on track for another 500,000. That's 1 million people over 2 years. Similar dynamics going right across the country, including Alberta. We need to build schools. We need to build roads. We need to build infrastructure. We got to open up the Ring of Fire. We're talking about a road, an access road up to the critical minerals that many want for the electric vehicle batteries. And President Biden says, you've got them all here. And we're talking about a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the North, where you can fit Germany, France, and England into Northern Ontario. And First Nations are leading the environmental assessment. So, when we work together, we need the federal government. We need to work on things that drive this country forward.
Mm-hmm. Quickly running out of time, but I do have to ask you, Minister, because Chrystia Freeland does say that a meeting will happen, but no details yet. Any idea of particulars at this point as to timing?
I don't. I mean, I just sent the letter on yesterday morning at 9 a.m. So I think we're moving pretty fast. I was very encouraged by Chrystia Freeland. She immediately said that's a great idea. The chair of the Federal Provincial Territories meeting, Alan McMaster, the Minister of Finance of Nova Scotia, is leading the charge to get us together. I'm an optimist. I think we'll get together sooner than later, and I think we just have that urgency to keep working on things for not just Ontarians, but for all Canadians.
Okay, so forewarning, we'll probably call you for an interview at that point. But for now, Minister.
Stay close to my phone, Michael.
Okay, I appreciate that. Minister, thank you for the time this evening. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.